Arlington's main gate held its breath. Morning light washed the white stone and the green sweep of hills beyond flags set at half-mast stirring in the soft wind. Gravel murmured under polished shoes. A guard squared his shoulders, chin lifted, and let the line tear out of him like a verdict. "Is this some kind of joke?" Arthur Hale did not answer. He simply stood, a slim figure in a dark suit gone shiny at the elbows, hat in his left hand, right hand resting near the lapel where a small, tarnished pin caught a blink of sun. It was no bigger than a dime, misshapen dull, a tease, a whisper of meaning pinned close to his heart. "Sir," the guard said, flattening syllables into procedure, "this is a restricted service." "Credentials." Arthur's voice was steady, the warmth of old radio low, even certain. "I'm here for him." "For who exactly?" Another guard stepped in, boots crunching. "Name, invitation. If you don't have it, you'll need to move along." Arthur kept his gaze on the chapel road where wind combed the grass and the hush of the place pressed down like a hand on a shoulder. "I'm not leaving." The younger of the two barked a laugh. "Look around, sir. Government plates, black sedans. This isn't a stroll. You can visit public sections down the hill." Arthur said nothing. The breeze popped the flag like a soft drum roll. Somewhere, a door thudded shut. Somewhere, a thrush tested 3 notes and thought better of it. The crowd behind the rope line began to collect the quiet rub of fabric. A cough stifled the paper whisper of a program. Gravel shifted under careful steps as people slowed to look. In their eyes, curiosity, pity, a pinch of annoyance that such a small thing could slow so solemn a day. "Sir," the first guard tried again. "I need to see something." Arthur tilted his head. "You're seeing it. What does that mean?" "It means I'm here for him," Arthur said not unkindly. "That's what it means." The younger guard lifted a gloved hand toward Arthur's lapel. "And what's this trinket veterans wear their service?" "Medals. Ribbons." His finger hovered impatient. Arthur's eyes, clear and steady, held. "Don't touch that." "Then do the right thing and turn around," the guard said, voice crisp with borrowed thunder. "We have procedures. Procedures keep us safe," the first guard added gentler. "But they also keep us moving. Please don't make this harder." Arthur shifted his hat to his other hand. "Son, I'm not making anything harder." Name the young one snapped, impatience scraping through the quiet. "You keep saying you're here. For who?" "For a man who would understand," Arthur said. The crowd's murmur thickened velvet against stone. A woman in black touched the sleeve of a companion and shook her head, tiny and sad. A chaplain paused near the gate and watched the silver cross on his collar catching the same sun that struck the humble pin. The low wind lifted and laid the flag again. Snap, sigh, hush. "Look," the young guard said, stepping closer. "We've got a schedule. The procession is due any minute. You can't stand here," and Gravel answered the approaching rhythm of heavier steps. A lieutenant, jaw-tight cap, set just so, took the last few paces with the confidence of rank and the speed of a problem found and about to be solved. "What's the issue?" he asked. "Non-credentialed civilian at the main gate, sir," the young guard said. "Refuses to clear. Claims he's here for the deceased." The lieutenant considered Arthur Coat, brushed clean shoes, scuffed honest face mapped by years that did not beg for mercy and did not expect it. His eyes flicked to the pin. He frowned. "Sir, the lieutenant said this is a private service. We have to maintain order. If you've lost your invitation, there's a process. Today is not the day to make a point." "I'm not making a point," Arthur said. "I'm making a promise." To who the lieutenant pressed? To a friend. Name Arthur's silence was not defiance. It was a porch light left on warm, patient. He stood with the easy balance of someone used to waiting post office lines, clinic chairs, church basements with coffee in foam cups. He had waited most of his life for people to decide who they thought he was. "Sir," the lieutenant said, voice cooling, "without credentials you cannot enter. Last time I'll ask." "I'm not leaving." Arthur repeated, as if setting a cup on a saucer, as if choosing to stand in light instead of shade. "Lieutenant," the older guard murmured, "maybe we check." "Check what the young one cut in. He's got nothing." Arthur's eyes never left the road to the chapel. "I have enough." "What you have is a problem," the young guard said, "and you're about to make it ours." A thin metallic clink echoed a flag clip tapping its pole, then the hush fell deeper. A car door far off, a cough, the tight squeak of leather as someone folded their hands. Wind caught the flag again. Snap, snap, soft, crackle, then stillness. "Sir," the lieutenant said, softer now, "this isn't personal. It always is," Arthur said. "In places like this, it always is. You think this pin means something?" The young guard asked, the impatience back. "Because it doesn't here. Not without paper. Arthur's hand rose a fraction, not to shield, not to boast, just a reflex toward that small, battered metal. It means I remember. The lieutenant exhaled a practiced patience thinning. We can do this the easy way. Step back to the public entrance. Pay your respects from there. Arthur's voice lowered almost to a hum, old radio at midnight. Respect starts at a gate like this. A program fluttered from someone's hands and skated a yard on the breeze. The chaplain bent to catch it. He glanced from the page to Arthur, then to the lieutenant weighing something that could not be seen and could not be tallied. Time, the young guard said, checking a wristwatch that gleamed like a tiny sun. We're past time. Sir, the lieutenant said firm once more, this is your last warning. Arthur's fingers tightened around the brim of his hat. He did not lean forward or back. He did not raise his voice. He did not ask for sympathy. He let the place speak for him, the grass, the rose, the stone, the air that remembered how to be quiet when it had to. I'm not leaving. The lieutenant's jaw set. He nodded once to the guards, a crisp closing motion that cut through the hush and left no room for interpretation. When he spoke, the order rode out clear, flat, and cold. Remove him. The rope line thickened as cars nosed in and doors thudded shut, soft, respectful, practiced. Low chatter gathered under the maples like a hush with seams. Programs rustled. Patent leather whispered over gravel. The air smelled of cut grass and starch. Arthur Hale stayed where he was, hat in hand, eyes steady past the gate. People looked, because people do. Then they looked longer. Pity landed first, then the little wince of annoyance. How could a single old man bend a morning like this? A woman in a black pillbox hat whispered to the colonel beside her. Who is he? Don't know, the colonel murmured. But he isn't on my list. Closer to the gate, a young captain paused mid-step. His face held the careful blank of a man who'd learned to see and say nothing until it mattered. His gaze snagged on the dull glint at Arthur's lapel. Sir, he asked one of the guards under his breath, what's that pin he's wearing? The guard didn't look. Trinket, he said. Not regulation. The captain leaned a touch, just enough to catch the misshapen metal dime small set, crooked as if pinned in a hurry, and never moved again. The captain's mouth thinned. He didn't know why it mattered yet. He only knew it snagged. Lieutenant Cole Bennett stepped forward, the brim of his cap cutting a clean line across his brow. The crowd's sound softened the way a room hushes when a judge enters. He had the walk of a man who trusted schedules and walls. Sir Bennett called to Arthur, This is an active security perimeter. You are not on the list. Arthur's voice carried like a late-night announcer through kitchen static. I'm here for him. For the last time, Bennett said, Who? A friend. That isn't sufficient. Bennett's glance cut sideways. Credentials. The younger guard brightened finally, the step on the checklist he understood. He has none, sir. A chaplain paused within earshot, hands folded over the edge of a leather binder. He looked from Bennett to Arthur, then to the crowd already knitting its story. A general's aide, trim and quiet, tried to help. Lieutenant, we could verify with what Bennett's smile was quick and thin, a feeling. He faced Arthur again. You're trespassing, he said, each syllable crisp enough to shelve. No credentials. Arthur let the words pass like weather. I'm here for him, he said again, not stiff, not pleading, just as if he were reading a name from a list only he could see. The captain, who'd noticed the pin, drifted a few steps closer. Sir, he asked Arthur gently, what is that you're wearing? Arthur touched the lapel with 2 fingers. Something I was given. Bennett's jaw flexed. Irrelevant, he said. If any of us walked in without paper today, we'd be outside the rope like everyone else. Rules are how we honor the day. Sometimes they're how we miss it, Arthur said. There was a soft wave along the rope line as 2 high-ranking officers arrived with family. A boy of 10, tie-tight eyes wide, looked at Arthur and tugged his mother's sleeve. Mom, why won't they let him in? Hush, she said, though she didn't look away either. Bennett took a measured breath. Sir, your refusal is disrupting the procession. We are minutes from movement. Arthur's gaze slid for a heartbeat from the chapel road to the boy, then back again as if he'd heard a bell behind glass. His tone did not change. I won't be long. The captain tried one more door. Lieutenant, I can make a call. You'll do no such thing, Bennett said, Steele entering the words. We are not crowdsourcing the gate. A paper program slipped from someone's hand and skidded over the asphalt, stopped by Arthur's shoe. He bent, picked it up, dusted the corner, and held it out to a man in a dark suit who had stepped forward to retrieve it. Thank you, the man said, surprised at the gentleness of the moment. Arthur nodded. You're welcome. Bennett's cheek twitched. He pointed at the pin. That is not proof. We need documentation. Invitations. Scannable credentials. Arthur's fingers rested lightly on the pin again. This doesn't scan, he said. It only remembers. A small smile ghosted across the chaplain's face at the phrasing, then vanished, as if he'd hidden it in his sleeve. Murmurs pressed from the rope line, then thinned, then rose again, sound knitting and unknitting as different interpretations took the stage. Pity, annoyance, a few glances that looked like shame. The captain shifted closer, voice lowered. Sir, may I at least have your name? Arthur didn't answer directly. When I was a boy, he said, the radio warmth of his voice rounding the edges, I stood in a post office line with my mother on a hot July afternoon. 2 windows open, 1 clerk new. People sighed. A man at the front turned and said, We'll be here all day. My mother smiled and said, Then we'll be here all day together. He glanced at the rope line, at the boy, at the chaplain, at the officers who had seen too much, and those who had not yet seen. Patience is a kind of respect. The boy's mother blinked, then looked down at her son, softening. The captain listened harder. Even Bennett held still for a breath, as if measuring whether the story hit a key. Sir Bennett said finally, resetting his tone, This is not the post office. This is a state funeral. We cannot indulge. Respect, Arthur said quietly, isn't indulgence. Enough. Bennett cut the word clean. He turned to the guards. Document this. Time, position, refusal. Then the captain tried to wedge one last sliver of sense into the hinge. Lieutenant, I've seen something like that pin once. If you'd give me 60 seconds, I could. Captain Bennett said, the rank clicking like a latch. This is my gate. He faced Arthur, set his feet, squared his shoulders so the black of his uniform cut a hard line against the pale stone and the green. Sir, by remaining you are interfering with a military ceremony. Arthur's eyes were clear. I'm here for him, he said, and the words were softer this time, like a phrase handed back across a counter you'd visited all your life. Nothing about this is personal, Bennett said. It is entirely personal, the chaplain said before he could help himself, then pressed his lips together as if he'd spoken in church too loud. Bennett ignored it. He lifted a hand, palm down, one of those signals that moves bodies because bodies have learned to move when the hand moves. Last chance, he said to Arthur. Public entrance. Now. Arthur's hat, tucked against his ribs, stood as if a porch swing had just creaked into motion somewhere beyond the trees. He breathed the bright, cut-grass air. He let the quiet of the place sit in him and answer for him. I'm here for him. The crowd's murmur thickened again, then went thin like fabric pulled tight across a table. Car doors muted shut farther down the road. A radio somewhere hissed and then went still. Paper rustled programs, maps the stiff blue card with the order of march. The captain's fingers hovered near his phone. Bennett looked left-right, then past Arthur into the quiet that should have been absolute. It wasn't. It had the small, living sounds of people bracing. He tipped his chin to the guards, a short, practiced motion that clicked the next step into place. Take him. The command tent breathed in short, busy sounds, canvas ticking in the breeze, radios clearing their throats, paper maps sighing when hands slid across them. Down at the gate, the rope line held its tremor. The crowd's whisper rose and fell like surf against stone. Arthur Hale did not move. Hat against his ribs, gaze steady on the chapel beyond the trees, he stood as though the path were already marked and time only had to catch up to it. Lieutenant Cole Bennett's voice sharpened. You are under arrest. A hush struck the crowd, soft, shocked collective. Sir. The older guard tried maybe. Cuff him, Bennett said, not raising his tone, only tightening it. The young captain who'd noticed the pin felt the air thin behind his breastbone. He stepped closer to Arthur, to the guards, to the decision that had started moving without him. Lieutenant, he said, I need 60 seconds. You need a chain of command, Bennett replied. Then let me use it, the captain said. His voice did not shake. Please. Bennett stared at him. Something like impatience flickered. Something like caution did not. He tipped his chin 30 seconds in the language of small mercies. The captain pivoted away, phone in his palm shoulder, turned to shield the call from the rope line. He walked 3 paces toward the service road where the wind carried the smell of cut grass and hot rubber. His thumb moved quick. Ops, he said into the phone, connect me to General Reed's liaison. Priority. Verification at the main gate. Static, then a voice. Stand by. The captain looked back at Arthur. The pin caught a blink of sun. It looked like nothing and like everything. The line clicked. Liaison. Captain Noah Briggs, he said. At the main gate. We have an elderly civilian being detained, no credentials. He's wearing a small, misshapen metal pin, dime-sized, crooked on the lapel. It's not regulation. It looks like shrapnel. The liaison did not answer at first. The radio at the captain's shoulder hissed. A car door thudded somewhere beyond the hedges. A program cracked faintly in someone's hand. "Say that again," the liaison said, voice lower. "Describe the pin. Misshapen. Dull. Not a coin. Not a badge. Looks hand-forged. Set slightly askew like it was pinned fast long ago. Name," the liaison asked. "He hasn't given one," Briggs said. "He keeps saying, 'I'm here for him.'" A small, clear bell, one of the chapels, ticked a single note as if it had forgotten itself and remembered. The sound threaded the tension like a silver wire. The liaison spoke again, clipped urgent. "Captain, hold your position. I'm escalating." Briggs kept his voice even. "We have an arrest order at the gate. Who gave it, Lieutenant Bennett?" The liaison's tone changed by a shade. "Stay on the line." Back at the rope, Bennett watched the captain with the impatience of a man who'd seen calls used to dodge responsibility. He nodded to the guards. "Hands. Now." "Lieutenant," the older guard whispered the captain. "This is my gate," Bennett said. He stepped toward Arthur. "Sir, place your hands out." Arthur's eyes remained on the chapel road. "I promised I'd be here," he said, almost to the trees. "I keep my promises." "Hands," Bennett repeated. "Lieutenant," the chaplain said carefully. "For what it's worth." "It's not," Bennett said. Briggs heard the radio fence around him pop a channel opening elsewhere, voices dropping the tent up the hill, tightening its seams. The liaison returned, voice low and precise. "Captain Briggs, confirm your description." Briggs did. He added the part he hadn't said yet, the one that had been fidgeting behind his ribs. "Sir, it looks like a piece of something no one would throw away." A breath, then another voice came onto the line. Older, steadier cut from parade grounds and long rooms where decisions are weighted before they are spoken. "This is Reed," the voice said. "Who is at my gate?" "An elderly gentleman," Sir Briggs said. "Dark suit. Pin of shrapnel. No credentials. And your lieutenant. Ordering an arrest, sir." The line went so quiet it seemed to draw the sound out of the air around Briggs. Captain General Thomas Reed said, "Repeat the pin." "Shrapnel, sir. Dime-sized, misshapen, crooked on the lapel." A breath, not quite a sigh. When Reed spoke again, the gentleness and the steel both showed. "Hold the line." "Captain, do not let this progress 1 inch further." "Yes, sir." Reed did not wait. Briggs heard other orders leave Reed's voice and enter the radios around him, moving like current through wire. In the tent up the hill, chairs slid back. On the service road, drivers sat up straighter. Bennett reached for Arthur's wrist. Arthur didn't flinch. He only lifted his hand a fraction palm open, a gesture as old as civil places. "Careful," he said quietly. "You're standing where vows are kept." Sir Bennett said, "You're obstructing." Briggs covered the mouth of his phone, pivoted back. "Lieutenant," he called crisp, "stand fast." Bennett turned incredulous. On whose authority? Briggs let the single word out like a measured bell stroke. "General Reed's." A seam in the hush tore. The crowd breathed as one. The chaplain's shoulders sank a fraction. The boy at the rope line leaned forward, eyes bright. "Prove it," Bennett said. Briggs didn't argue. He lifted the phone, hit speaker. The liaison's voice came first. "All stations stand by for the commanding general." Then, Reed's baritone filling the small air main gate. Bennett straightened instinctively. "Sir," there was no preface. "Halt everything," Reed said. "Now." The words rolled down the road into radios up through the tent. A driver's hand froze on a gear shift. A sergeant stopped mid-step. The wind paused as though duty-bound. Bennett's jaw worked. "Sir, with respect," Lieutenant Reed said, and even in 2 syllables there was a brief biography of the man. "Do not touch that gentleman." A new hush fell deeper, clearer, as if the place had chosen sides. Arthur's gaze did not waver. He did not smile. He simply let the order settle where it belonged. Briggs angled the phone back to his ear. "Sir, do you require identification?" "Captain." "Listen carefully," Reedy said. "You will not move him. You will not remove him. You will approach, identify yourself, and ask him one question. Are you here for him? If he answers in the affirmative, and he will, you will wait with him until I arrive." "Yes, sir." "Describe the gentleman's demeanor." "Calm, sir." "Steady," Goodread said. Paper moved on his end. A chair scraped. The sound of another lower voice asking him something blurred past the receiver. "Hold. I'm en route." The line clicked off. Briggs pocketed the phone and stepped toward Arthur. "Sir," he said gently, My name is Captain Noah Briggs. Are you here for him?" Arthur's eyes warmed the way a porch light warms when a shadow passes it and keeps going. "Yes." "Then we'll wait," Briggs said. Bennett's mouth thinned. "Captain, you've exceeded Lieutenant Briggs said the general's order was explicit." "I didn't hear a destination," Bennett replied. "He said halt. He didn't say bring. Sometimes halting is the destination," the chaplain murmured. Bennett ignored him. He looked at Arthur as if he could file the man. "This isn't how we do things. It is exactly how we do them," Briggs said, surprised at his own firmness hidden under his training. "We make room for judgment." A single church bell distant tolled once then, once again, faint as if it had drifted on the high air above the stones. The rope line's murmurs softened. The programs stilled. Even the wind seemed to fold its hands. From the service road a radio crackled short-clipped urgent. Tires carried a low, approaching thrum. The crowd lifted their heads as one. Bennett squared himself, the motion polished to reflex. Positions. The sound grew not the slow patience of a procession, but the focused hum of decision. The first SUV crested the slight rise, black paint throwing back the sky like a mirror. It braked hard. Gravel spat and skittered. The second and third slid in behind precise. Doors thumped open, front, rear, rear. 1, 2, 3, like drums struck in measure. The air took one great silent breath and held it. The three black SUVs settled in a staggered line, engines ticking as heat lifted in thin veils from their hoods. The brass band at the chapel path faltered, then let its march cadence dissolve to a respectful hush. Gravel lay newly scattered like pale coins. Doors opened. First aides, then two senior NCOs, then a chaplain's assistant. At last, General Thomas Reed stepped out, tall shoulders squared by a lifetime of weight carried evenly. His stars caught the morning light. His boots made a deliberate rhythm across the gravel, a slow, certain metronome. The rope line relaxed and tightened at once, a crowd learning how to breathe around a moment. Bennett's salute snapped up. General on sight. Reedy did not return it yet. His eyes took in the scene as if reading an instrument panel, the gate, the rope line, the boy at the front clutching his mother's hand, the chaplain, the guards, the captain holding his ground, the lieutenant standing too rigid for the shape of the day. Then the general looked at Arthur Hale. The place went very quiet, the kind of quiet that contains an organ's breath before the first chord. Wind gathered the flag and set it down again. Somewhere, a single leaf turned its bright side and then its dark as if agreeing. Reed halted 3 feet from Arthur. Rank hung in the air like weather. Courtesy settled beside it like shade. "Sir Reed," said voice, a warm baritone that carried without effort. "May I approach?" Arthur inclined his head. "You already have." Bennett began. "General, this individual?" Reed raised one finger, small and precise. Bennett's words stopped as if a light had changed. The general's gaze dropped to the dull gleam on Arthur's lapel. The pin sat as it had all morning, crooked by a breath the color of a storm-blunted nail, the size of a forgotten dime. "May I see?" Reed asked. "From where you stand," Arthur said. Reed nodded. He did not reach. He did not prod. He simply set his hands at his sides and let the memory of metal take its place between them. When he spoke again, he did not speak to Arthur alone. He spoke to the rope line, to the guards, to the boy, to the afternoon this morning would become. "There are honors you can order," he said, "and there are honors you can only inherit." He looked at the pin as if it were the face of a wristwatch he had worn through entire decades. "This little thing," he said gently, "is what is left when fire meets flesh and obligation. Not official, not issued, not the kind of metal you polish, the kind you keep." Bennett swallowed. "With respect, sir." "With respect," Lieutenant Reed said, eyes still on the pin. "There are some respects you cannot abbreviate." He lifted his chin a fraction and let his voice travel. "Ladies and gentlemen, many of you have worn rows of ribbon and know what they mean. Some of you have not and still understand anyway. What you see on this gentleman's lapel is not decoration. It is an address. It tells me where he once had to stand." A soft breath moved through the crowd like the first pew rising in a church because the second had decided to. Reedy shifted his attention from the pin to Bennett. "Who ordered the arrest I did, sir?" Bennett said. He tried to hold the firmness in his spine as a moral position rather than a habit. "On what grounds interfering with the ceremony, sir? No credentials. Trespassing." Reedy considered him a long heartbeat, then turned back to Arthur with something like grief and pride in the same glance. "Sir," he said to Arthur, "may I ask your name?" Arthur's eyes, steady, almost amused at the fuss that had finally named itself, did not waver. Before he could answer, Bennett stepped forward. "General, we can verify identity after the area is secure." Reedy's head turned, and for a moment the weight of command was a visible thing in the air, like heat shimmer. "Lieutenant," he said softly, "the area is secure when judgment is secure." Silence trimmed the edges of the morning. The boy at the rope line held his breath without realizing it. Briggs, standing a respectful half-step back, said quietly, "Sir, I can confirm the sequence of events." "You already did." Reedy replied kind without a smile. He took one measured pace toward Arthur, still not close enough to touch the pin, close enough to speak to it. "I know what this is," he said. "I know because once long ago I watched a man decline a box full of shine and accept a shard instead." He lifted his eyes to the rope line, letting the words place themselves where everyone could reach them. "There are days when the uniform speaks for you, and then there are days when you must speak for the uniform." He turned to Bennett not to shame him, but to teach him so directly that the lesson would live in his hands. "Lieutenant, what you could not see is what we are here to see. This man is not the interruption. He is the reason we learn to listen before we sort." Bennett's mouth opened and shut. Pride and the sting of being corrected in public fought then fell, then left a space that hurt because it was growing. Sir Arthur said the radio warmth of his voice laid like a blanket over the day they're just kids. "Let it be." Reedy's eyes softened at once. He nodded once. Relief edged his breath. "I hear you," he said. Then he took a step back, drew himself up, and the air seemed to clarify. He raised his right hand to his brow, fingers straight, wrist clean, elbow high and true. It was not the kind of salute that says good morning in a hallway. It was the kind that says we know what matters, and we will not pretend otherwise. He held it. A gasp rose and fell around the rope line, then quieted into something deeper. The older guard's hand climbed of its own accord. Then the younger's stiff at first, then steadier. A colonel's hand went up, then a private's, then the chaplain's palm opened like a prayer and found the brim of its own invisible cap. The boy looked at his mother. She nodded. He put his small hand to his forehead, earnest as a pledge. Bennett stood very still. His arm rose a beat late. It wavered, then straightened, not because he was told, but because he suddenly wished to be worthy. Reed held the salute and spoke without lowering it. His voice made the white stone sound warmer. "Sir," he said to Arthur on behalf of the men who didn't come home, and the ones who did because someone carried them, and the ones who learned to live afterward by watching what quiet looks like, "I honor you." Arthur did not bow. He did not deflect with a joke. He let the words land and live. His eyes shone not with spectacle, but with the recognition that some debts are paid in witness. Reedy lowered his hand. He faced Bennett not with anger, but with that rarer, harder gift of exactness. "Lieutenant Bennett, he said you were given a gate and you guarded it. Good. But gates are not merely for keeping out. They are for recognizing who must be let in." "Yes, sir," Bennett said. The words tasted like humility. He did not spit them out. "You will report to my aide at the conclusion of the service," Reedy continued. "We will speak about policy, yes, but more about people. You will attend a course we are establishing for precisely this history discretion and the courage to use both. You will help teach it when you have learned it." "Yes, sir," Bennett said again, this time with something like a promise in it. Reedy turned to Briggs. "Captain, thank you," Sir Briggs said, flushing as if someone had set a lamp inside him. The brass band, unsure, offered a measure. Reed lifted a hand and it fell away, leaving a rich quiet that the choir in the chapel picked up as a low hum. No words yet, only breath made music. Pigeons startled, then settled. The flag stirred, then rested. Reed stepped close enough now to rest a hand not on Arthur's shoulder, but near it, as if asking permission without asking. "May I escort you in?" Arthur breathed a long, steady breath that traveled old distances. "If you're going that way," he said. "I am," Reed answered. They turned together. The gate that had been a line became a threshold. The guard stepped aside not out of fear, but out of the simple courtesy that follows understanding. As Arthur passed the rope line, heads inclined, hats moved, eyes found the ground because the ground mattered. The boy at the front whispered, "Mom?" "Yes," she said. Eyes bright. "Is he important?" She squeezed his shoulder. He was when nobody knew it. That's the best kind. Arthur's pace was measured not slow like a man keeping time with a memory he didn't need to outrun. The pin caught one more small glint and then settled into shadow. The chapel doors, half open, breathed cool air and a hint of lilies into the warm morning. The choir's hum bloomed a little, then gentled again. At the aisle, Reed leaned toward the usher at the front row. His baritone softened further. Family seating, he said, a statement, not a request. The usher blinked, then moved, then smiled as if a puzzle piece had been found under the couch. Arthur hesitated one heartbeat only at the edge of that front row. He looked at the photograph on the easel, the folded flag on its stand, the silver of the bugle resting mute beside it. He lifted his hat an inch, not for show, but the way you lift a hat when a neighbor's widow passes your fence. "Please," a woman whispered from the end of the row, making room with the firmness of grief that has made decisions all morning. "Sit with us." Arthur nodded. He took the offered place. The choir drew breath for the first lyric. Outside, the band's brass gave up the field to silence. From the back of the chapel through the doorway, the crowd's faces gathered, curious, chastened, changed. Bennett stood just beyond the threshold, hands folded, eyes lowered, not in shame now, but in respect. Briggs found a place against the wall and let out the breath he'd been holding since the phone call. Reedy remained standing a moment longer at the aisle's head. He looked down the length of the room, the windows, the flag, the faces, the man who had asked for nothing and been given what could be given. He laid his palm lightly on the pew as if blessing the wood. Then he took his seat beside the family. Applause would have been wrong. So the room gave the only gift left, a stillness warm and complete that made space for gratitude to speak without words. The organist touched a single chord, soft as a hand to a cheek, and let it ring. Outside, the wind fell calm. The maples held their leaves. A final hush settled like a shawl over the morning, and in that quiet eyes turned and stayed on Arthur Hale, front row. Now the small battered pin no longer glinting, but present all the same, like the promise he had kept by standing at a gate until someone remembered what gates are for. The hymn rose like a tide, the choir's voices reaching the rafters and then softening, letting silence fold itself neatly between verses. Programs whispered in hands. The organist's fingers hovered, then rested waiting. The congregation leaned together in shared breath. Arthur Hale sat in the front row, hat in his lap, eyes fixed on the photograph of the man they had come to honor. The battered pin on his lapel caught only a hint of light, muted now, no longer the center of conflict, but part of the tapestry of respect. When the hymn ended, a ripple moved through the family pew. A woman reached for Arthur's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, voice tremoring. "We would not have had him for 50 years if not for you." Arthur shook his head slowly. "We all came home because of one another," he said, but he let her hold his hand a moment longer. The boy who had watched at the rope line earlier shifted closer with his mother. He studied Arthur as if trying to memorize details. "Are you really?" He hesitated, then whispered, "Are you the shepherd?" Arthur's eyes softened. "I was a man who did what he could." The boy's mother touched his shoulder. "We are grateful, sir. That's enough." Behind them, the organ hummed a low chord. Paper rustled as ushers moved programs and guides into the foyer where a table stood with framed photographs, the general as a cadet with his family, and finally with comrades in the field. Beside the frames, the pin had been placed, still crooked, still dull, its story now unhidden. Murmurs rippled. "That's it, the one they spoke of, a medal no mint ever struck." A chaplain cleared his throat not to speak long, only to mark the moment. "Symbols remind us. Stories complete us. Today, we honor both." At the back, Lieutenant Bennett stood at attention, shoulders taut. An aide stepped near, voice low. "Orders from General Reed. You're reassigned effective immediately. You'll report to the new Sentinel course." The aide's tone carried no ridicule, only instruction. Bennett's lips pressed thin. "I understand." "It's not punishment," the aide added. "It's correction. You'll teach it when you're ready." Bennett nodded once. His eyes drifted back to Arthur in the front row, then to the pin in the foyer. He had not understood before. He understood enough now to know he would spend years catching up. Arthur, sensing none of this, kept his posture still, listening as the choir swelled again. He remembered other songs in other places, men humming to stay awake, to stay steady, to stay alive. The music here was cleaner, but the ache beneath it was familiar. During the recessional, the family rose. They turned to Arthur not as a stranger, but as kin. Arms encircled him. "Please," one of the daughters said, "stand with us." He shook his head gently. "I'll follow," he said. But still, they held him, insistence wrapped in gratitude. As the crowd spilled toward the foyer, the library board near the chapel doors caught the eye. A new notice had been pinned there. Sentinel Course History, Judgment, Empathy. required for all new officers. The print was official. The ink was still sharp. A colonel read it aloud to those gathering near. Murmurs of approval spread. "This will last," someone said. It should, another replied. "It's about time." Justice had moved from moment to memory, from memory to policy. Arthur paused at the threshold, letting others pass. The foyer light fell across the pin on display. People stopped, bowed slightly, whispered thanks. No guard touched it now. No one doubted its place. What had been dismissed as junk was now a relic, an echo of sacrifice and friendship that no credential could match. Briggs, the young captain, found Arthur's side. "Sir," he said, "I only made a call, but I would follow your steadiness anywhere." Arthur glanced at him. "Calls matter," he said simply. "Sometimes that's all it takes to turn a day." The boy from the rope line tugged his mother's hand again, pointing toward the library board notice. "Is that because of him?" His mother nodded. "Yes, it is." Arthur looked away toward the window where sunlight cut through stained glass. He did not smile, but the lines of his face eased. The echo had found its way. The organ swelled one last time, a chord that filled the chapel and spilled into the foyer, wrapping the notice board, the photographs, and the pin. The sound seemed to bind them all together, past and present mistake and correction, silence and song. When the chord faded, the air felt lighter. Yet the question hovered quiet but persistent, the way truth always hovers after ceremony. Will they remember? The rain had eased, leaving the diner windows streaked in silver trails. Neon from the sign outside trembled in each drop. Inside, the air held the warm clutter of plates, the hiss of a griddle, and the low hum of a jukebox tuned to a station that still believed in old crooners. Arthur Hale eased himself onto a stool at the counter. He set his hat beside him and folded his hands. The waitress topped off his coffee without asking. "Refills on me, hon," she said with a smile, already moving on to another table. The pin on his lapel caught the yellow glow of the hanging lamp, crooked still but shining softer here than it had under the scrutiny of uniforms and orders. It seemed smaller now, ordinary, but the kind of ordinary that stayed. From a corner booth, Lieutenant Cole Bennett rose. He wore no rank today, only a plain jacket, the kind that could be mistaken for anonymity. He hesitated, then walked toward the counter, each step measured. Arthur looked up as the young man slid into the seat beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. The clatter of cutlery and the scrape of a chair filled the silence. Bennett cleared his throat. "Sir," I wanted to say. Arthur raised a hand gently. "No need for sir." Bennett nodded, chastened. "Arthur, then. I wanted to say thank you, and I'm sorry." Arthur stirred his coffee slowly. "You're learning. That's enough." "I thought rules were the whole of respect," Bennett admitted. His voice had the grain of someone rehearsing truth until it hurt. But rules without judgment. He stopped groping for the words. Arthur glanced sideways, patient. Bennett let the rest out in a single breath. "Respect is judgment, not ribbons." Arthur's eyes softened. He reached, laid a weathered hand on the young man's forearm. His voice, quiet as a benediction, carried more weight than any reprimand. "Stay safe, son." The words settled in the air like a hymn's final note. Around them, the diner lived its own rhythm. Orders called from the kitchen, the bell above the door jingling with newcomers, the faint smell of bacon and coffee grounds. Life continuing, not noticing that a lesson had been handed from one generation to the next. Bennett swallowed, nodded once, then stood. He left a $10 bill on the counter beside Arthur's cup. "For the coffee," he said, voice thick. He paused at the door, looking back only long enough to add, "And for the lesson." Arthur gave the smallest nod, almost a smile, then turned back to his cup. Outside, the rain picked up again. Bennett stepped into it without raising his collar, letting it wash him clean of pride. Arthur lingered. He sipped, listening to the jukebox spin a tune from decades past. The melody carried him to a porch swing, long-gone wood creaking under summer weight, fireflies drifting in and out of sight. He could almost hear a younger voice calling from inside the house, almost smell the honeysuckle on the fence. Peace had a sound, and he remembered it. News clippings would later record the plaque unveiled at Arlington's gate, inscribed simply, "For those who stood watch unseen." The Sentinel course would continue, each new class reminded of a morning when judgment mattered more than procedure. The story would echo in training halls and libraries where the notice hung in quiet conversations between officers and their own sons. But here, in the diner's warm clutter, legacy felt smaller and truer. It was one man leaving space for another to change. Arthur let the coffee cool. He touched the pin once lightly, then left it alone. He lifted the cup to his lips, eyes on the window where raindrops raced each other down the glass. A faint smile lived at the edge of his mouth, barely there but enough. The jukebox hummed, the neon flickered, and the scene faded as quietly as it had come. Steam curled from the diner cups while the church bell down the street finished its gentle toll, and in that soft, ordinary music the old man's small weathered pin caught a warmer light than any parade ground ever gave it. Kindness, that expects nothing returned, remakes a day the way a lamp in a winter window remakes a street. No speeches, just steady glow, reminding us to look past uniforms and paperwork and see the person standing quietly at the gate. The Echo holds a plaque by the entrance, a notice for the Sentinel course tacked on the library board, and men and women pausing before they judge salutes offered slower and with clearer eyes. Let judgment lead and quiet honor finds its voice.